Welcome to Living Faith's weekly worship service. For more information about these services, please go to livingfaith.org.au. The Bible reading for this Sunday is Mark chapter 9, verses 2 through to 13. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud. "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. And they asked him, "Why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wished, just as it is written about him." Hi, welcome back. This is what is traditionally known as Transfiguration Sunday. It's the story, this time from the Gospel of Mark, although it does appear in Matthew and Luke as well, but Mark, they all tell it a little bit differently and for different purposes. Slightly different purposes anyway. So it's from Mark this year. It's an odd text, really. For a 21st century person to be reading, it's just an odd text. Jesus transfigured. His clothing begins to glow in Mark. In Matthew and Luke, his face glows as well. There's a glory about Jesus. God the Father turns up and speaks and says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." So for most of us, it's a fairy story, isn't it? We associate it with fairy stories because it just seems so unbelievable, so otherworldly. I suppose for many Christians who have had experience with God for a long time, who read this story and have heard it often, it's become a normal part of the yearly event to hear the story told and hear a sermon on it. But if we step back for a moment and look at it with the logical mind of a 21st century person, especially of an educated 21st century person, we've got to say this story is absolutely bizarre. And it's largely bizarre because most of us don't pick up on all the Old Testament references and allusions. It's absolutely packed with them. There's more than a dozen. And for us, looking at it this side of the of the second millennia, it's hard to take in because we don't know the culture, we don't understand the references, and not all of them are made obvious in the Bible itself. Even with the subtexts down below where it makes references, not all of them are listed. You really got to go hunting for them. Got to have researched and studied it. So on initial reading, it's difficult to get into. We might say, okay, this is the Bible telling us that Jesus is God, which is what Mark is actually telling us, that this is God. But then we might ask, so what? Well, the first century readers or listeners would have picked up all the references straight away. They would have made all of the links back to Elijah and Moses and made the comparisons between Jesus and Moses, and his face shining, Moses' face as he comes down from the mountain, Jesus as he glows in the Mount of Transfiguration, Elijah as he experiences the presence of God in a different way to Moses. His face didn't glow, But when he was ready to die, he ascended in a fiery chariot. And there's way more. There's the image of Jesus becoming the new temple because the old temple is about to be destroyed, or perhaps has been destroyed when Mark writes this. So there are lots of allusions, lots of connections, lots of references that most of us don't pick up on. So I'm wondering if we leave those references behind. Let's not worry about them. If you want to follow up on that, I can recommend YouTube. Just type in 1517. 1517 was the year that Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses. So just type in 1517 and Pastor Chad Bird will come up and he'll lead you through all the details. It's really interesting. It's fun to learn. But I think let's get to the point of the story, the purpose of why Mark is writing this. And first of all, it is to demonstrate that Jesus is God. Jesus appears with Moses and Elijah. Moses, the one to lead his people out of Egypt in the great exodus to the promised land. Jesus is the new Moses leading us, his people, in exodus from death to life through the cross and through his resurrection. He exercises the miraculous power of Elijah, and in the end he ascends to heaven without a burial, without dying. Here, having already passed through that, he ascends to heaven. So there are lots of connections. But there's more to it than that. And I think maybe if we pay attention to what's going on with the disciples, we might get something of an idea. Since you and I aren't Jesus, we are not God, we can't put ourselves in those shoes in this story. We can only put ourselves into the shoes of the disciples. So let's do that. Jesus is transformed. Moses and Elijah rock up, and Jesus is in conversation with them, and Mark's not really telling us what the conversation is about. But the disciples are awestruck and they're thrown into panic and fear and don't know how to respond. Peter just blurts out this thing about building booths for Jesus and Elijah and Moses. Now, he did that for a reason. He wasn't completely off track. He had some idea of what was going on. The rabbis had taught him when he was a boy that the Messiah was expected to come during the season of Sukkot, or the Festival of Booths in autumn. It was a festival that remembered the Exodus. So Moses turning up makes sense. Peter gets that much in his panic and nerves. He at least gets that. So he offers to build booths for each of them. In the end, the other two disappear, which only leaves Jesus, which if he was going to build a booth, only one was really needed, because all of Israel now and all of its history was now summed up in Jesus. But that's not even the point. That's just an interesting aside. What's going on with the disciples? They want to do something. Peter just has to do something. This vision in front of him, this theophany, this appearance of God in front of him, has so unnerved him that to avoid the observance of what was happening, to try and get his mind ticking over in a normal fashion, he just had to do something practical, build some booths. Isn't that what we do? When crisis hits, what do? Make a casserole, do something physical, something ordinary, something practical that we're used to. We have to do something. But instead, Jesus is wanting his disciples just to observe. That's why he brought them along. He wanted them to be witnesses to this down the line. He didn't want them to talk about it afterwards for a while. He wanted them to keep it to themselves until Jesus himself had decided to go public. So between that time, these guys had to wait. He wanted them, during the Transfiguration, he wanted them to wait, just to be still, to be silent, to do nothing and observe, pay attention to what was happening. But Peter had to be busy. His human nature just took over. And so Jesus afterwards tells them, don't tell this to anybody. So not only were they confused about what had happened, now they weren't allowed to talk about it. They had to wait until they had permission to do that. It's the waiting here that's important. It's understanding what the waiting is for, what the observance is for. We don't get waiting. Waiting seems to serve no purpose for us. And we get frustrated with it. We get frustrated with short waits and with long waits. But we wait, whether we like it or not. We wait in traffic. We wait in queues. Some smart individual on a blog did some sums in terms of the times we wait in different situations, and apparently we wait in lines for the equivalent of 6 months a year. We wait in traffic for the equivalent of 37 days. What did I say, 6 months? In a lifetime, I'm sorry, and 37 days a year in traffic. We're just sitting in traffic. It's crazy. And there's all kinds of other waiting for a customer service call, waiting for old computers to boot up. If you don't have fibre optic internet and you're still dialing up, then you're waiting for that. We're always waiting for something. Always waiting. And we don't know what to do with ourselves when we wait, especially when we're often by ourselves and there's nobody to talk to anyway. There's nothing much to do but sit in the car, sit in the doctor's office, sit on the phone, stand in the queue. We're just waiting. And it's frustrating. And the longer the wait, the more frustrating it gets. There are long waits as well. Just to get the joke out of the way, when I was an apprentice, my tradesman sent me to the company store to get a long wait. So I went and I asked for a long wait. And after a while, about 20 minutes, I realised I'd already had my long wait. So dad joke, out of the way, okay? The long wait is even more frustrating than the short wait. You know, we get upset in traffic. Road rage occurs because of a 5 or a 10-minute delay. But what if the wait is years? What if it goes on for years, the waiting? That's frustrating. I think the Western world is particularly frustrated at this time in history. COVID has added to the anxiety of that waiting, but it's not just COVID. This waiting was happening before that. There are many commentators and who believe that we, as a world community, are at an epoch-turning time, are moving from one era to another. And there's all sorts of indicators for that. And if you stop and think about it, you'll figure some of them out for yourself. But there seems to certainly be a change of worldview. Certainly I don't have the worldview of my parents, the 1950s worldview. And I've never really had a 20th century worldview either. I think I've been fairly young thinking most of my life, and I'm not that interested. I'm interested in the past to learn from it so I don't make the same mistakes, but I don't dwell in the past. I always dwell in the present and mostly in the future of what's coming next. Where am I going? What's happening next? And I suppose as a pastor and as a leader, that's one of my responsibilities, to paint a vision for the people I lead of where we're going. But I've been stuck for a long time, and I thought it was just me, but I've spoken to many other pastors and leaders, and everybody's feeling stuck. Not just because of COVID, but even prior to that, because the world is changing, our thinking is changing. The books we're reading and that are informing us are showing us that people are thinking differently, radically differently. Certainly millennials are, and the different generations are, but it's not just that. People across generations are beginning to see the world differently and think differently. There's so much information coming our way that it causes us to rethink our position, challenges us to change the way we think, challenges us to see the world differently and to find a different vision, a vision that fits the future, not one that fits me. And so we're waiting. If the Transfiguration teaches us anything about waiting, it teaches us to sit quietly, to observe, to wait on God, to be silent for a season until it's time to speak. And perhaps in the waiting, find something of a transformation for ourselves. Pretty sure that's Mark's message to us, that Jesus' transfiguration is our transformation. Jesus has been transformed. He died and he rose again. He led an exodus from the underworld of all those who had died in faith, and he leads us as well. When our time comes to die, he will lead us in that exodus from this life into the next, and he's already been transformed. But God is present all the time. There are opportunities in the waiting spaces. You know, the waiting spaces are called liminal spaces because liminal spaces are about transition from one place to another, from who I am right now to who I may be tomorrow, through the transfiguration of Jesus, through his transformation. His transformation is my transformation. And God is transforming me daily, and he's transforming you daily. For all those who have been baptized into Christ, transformation is happening. It might seem too slowly for me. We might look at other people and say it's way too slow for them. Why can't God hurry up and make that transformation a little faster? But Jesus is gentle and he transforms us at our own rate. Some days slowly, some days we have aha moments that transform us more rapidly, and there's great change in our lives. But transformation is happening all the time for the baptized people of God. If you're not baptized and you don't know what that means, then find somebody who does know and have a conversation about that with them. Because it's about being baptized into Jesus through water and having the name of God placed on us, being called God's child by God himself, being filled with the Spirit of God, the presence of God filling us. It's through all of that that the transformation occurs. So if you're not baptized, have a chat with somebody. Find a Christian somewhere and have a talk. Transformation is happening. God is present all the time. And the waiting times, those liminal moments of transition, whether it's in traffic or at the doctor or on the phone or waiting for something else to happen, whether it's a short wait or a long wait. The possibility exists in all those liminal spaces to sit quietly, to observe what's God doing, what's happening around God, what's happening in his kingdom, with the things that he's doing. How might that impact on me? How might that transform me? Sit. Stop first. Sit. Wait. Observe. And be transformed. God's offering. We just need to take advantage of the waiting. Stop being frustrated by it and use it to advantage. Wait on the Lord. Stop what you're doing. Observe what God is doing and be transformed. The disciples had to be silent until Jesus was ready to reveal himself publicly. So we don't need to be silent on that anymore. In fact, as the transformation happens with us, we'll come to a point sooner rather than later, I hope, for you, where God will call forth from us a voice that cries from the rooftops, Jesus is God, and he is transforming the world. Stop, observe, and be transformed. Have a great week. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favour and grant you his peace. Amen.